Welcome to the Peak of Possibility podcast. I'm your host, Glynis Franz, where we have sobering conversations about addiction, mental health recovery, wellness, and the incredible capacity we all have to heal and grow. This podcast is powered by Peak Path Health, where transformation begins and possibility becomes reality. Today's guest is Rabbi Iggy, spiritual counselor and head rabbi at Beit T'Shuvah, a nonprofit treatment center that integrates spirituality and addiction recovery. Let's get into today's episode. Rabbi Iggy.
Hello.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Have you done one of these before, a podcast?
Podcast? Yes.
Oh, so you're seasoned.
I don't know seasoned, but I have done podcast before.
Yeah, well, you look comfortable. That's great.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you're here. So, Rabbi Iggy, you are the rabbi for Beit T'Shuvah.
That is correct.
Right? How long have you been?
So I've been involved with Beit T'Shuvah for now close to 14 years maybe, but I've been the rabbi for over a year and a half almost, yeah.
Amazing. And so are you here in Los Angeles full time now?
Mostly full-time, yeah. I do 3 weeks in Los Angeles and 1 week in New York.
What do you do in New York for that week?
My partner and my children.
How many kids?
2.
And they live all the way in New York?
All the way
Oh my
in
gosh, so they don't come back with you. They don't live here.
No, they're adults.
Oh, okay.
My son is 24 and my daughter is 22. So, yeah, I have a job that I love, really, that I love my job. I'm good at my job. It's really important. I have a husband who I love. He has a job that he loves very much, and he's very good at. And unfortunately, they refuse to be in the same place.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, hey, you make it work.
Yeah, he is a doctor, and he runs large medical systems.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, So you are a rabbi.
Yes.
You have tattoos.
That is correct.
You just mentioned your husband, so
correct.
You're gay, right?
Yes. You don't have to tiptoe around it.
Okay,
yes.
Yeah, you're gay, and you work at Beit T'Shuvah, which, for context, for those of you that don't know what Beit T'Shuvah is, it's a nonprofit treatment center that has been around for how many years?
It will be 40 next year. We're 39. We just celebrated 39 years.
Okay, amazing. And so it's really, I'm very involved with Beit T'Shuvah.
Yeah.
You know, I mentor and work with a lot of women there, and I run the marathon and raise money.
That's right. Thank you. We raised a whole bunch of money. We raised a whole bunch of money this year.
$100,000, right?
$100,000.
Amazing. Yeah. And all of that goes to people who don't have money to go to treatment, right? So this is a place where somebody can call and go to if they're homeless on the street, if they don't have a dime, a dollar, no family support, which was me when I got sober, right? And so I was one of those people, unlike, the treatment center that I currently own, which is like really a beautiful location. But you have to have private health insurance or financial resources to go there, and a lot of people don't have that.
Most people don't have that.
Especially people who tend to struggle, statistically with alcoholism and drug addiction.
No, for sure. So we are a nonprofit, and we fundraise an enormous amounts to make sure that if you come to us and you are mission appropriate and we can help you, and we have a bed for you, that we will take you and we'll ask how you're going to pay for it later. That's our mission in many ways. We are about over 100 beds of sort of all the work that we need to do.
And it's long term too.
It's long term. 7 months is the program.
It used to be a year, right?
It used to be a year. Yeah. It's 7 months. We have IOP. We have the primary program. We have, but it's also a spiritual center, and also a temple and a synagogue and a sort of place where people have to not just have all the counseling services and the clinical services that we offer, which are really top notch, but also every person who comes in gets a spiritual counselor, and to really deal with sort of the really inner most important questions about who I am, what do I need to do? What's my purpose in this world? Is there a God? If so, what does it look like? You know, what does my spirit mean within the terms of spirituality?
Right.
And also in a separate way than religion, because it is two separate things. So,
right, because you don't have to be Jewish to go there.
You do not have to be Jewish.
Yeah, you don't.
We have a lot of Jews,
right?
But you don't have to be Jewish to go there. Correct? Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's back up a little bit. So,
sure.
You were raised in an Orthodox religious community.
That is correct.
Right? So what was that like growing up? What, for those that don't know what that even means.
Right? So Judaism has a few different movements, and the most sort of like traditional Orthodox, the most sort of religious one, observant, is Orthodoxy. And even within Orthodoxy, there's sort of like
different variations,
but all the way to the right. So I'm all the way to the right. I'm like sort of like what now we would call ultra-Orthodox.
Ultra-Orthodox.
Right? So, you know, yes, sort of if you're in LA and you walk around La Brea on Saturday, those, you know, hats, you know,
wigs, yes.
beards, the whole thing.
Right.
So, you know, growing up, in many ways, for me as a Jew, sort of like there's a great amount of privilege in terms of the knowledge sort of that we had to learn and sort of, and all the exposure to sort of deep spiritual, mystical texts that are all around. But also it's very, you know, you have to conform. Everybody looks the same and talks the same, and you do this and you do that. There's a lot of rules. You do this on this day and this and that, and then you take this blessing before this food and this blessing before our food. And there's no room for any error or neurodiversity, right? So diversity in practice. It's very clear what is right and what is wrong and what you do and what you don't do.
Very black and white.
It's literally black and white. You wear black pants and white shirt and pretty much all the time.
Wow. How many siblings did you have?
So I only have one sibling, although my cousins are prolific. So I have a lot of cousins, but I think my mother, had some trouble sort of conceiving and staying pregnant. And so, you know, after both of us, I think they continued to try, but I think sort of that was it for what it was. And
because typically large families.
Yes, my cousins have like, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 kids. Easy.
And you have an accent. Where are you from?
So I grew up in Belgium and New York. So I'm Belgian.
Wow.
So sort of all Belgian family.
Interesting.
I have an accent. So to the tattooed rabbi, gay, also immigrant with an accent, sort of like I'm the butt of every joke, you know, pretty much.
Well, at least you can make light of it.
You know,
you have to. Especially hanging out with a bunch of addicts, right?
Like, you know, nothing is sacred. I mean, you know,
there must be some levity. You got to laugh at some of the crazy experiences that we've had in order to kind of bring it full circle.
I don't want to be around people who can't laugh at themselves.
100%. I agree.
If you take yourself too seriously, like, dude,
loosen up.
Chill.
Exactly. So, at what point did you realize you were gay?
So, you know, it's interesting. I'm a child of the 70s. So, you know, and again, in Belgium and Europe and sort of, no internet, minimal TV, no cable, blah, blah, all that.
So like really no access to pop culture at this time.
Very little.
Right, because you're growing up in this very insulated.
That's right. Sort of pop culture came later when sort of like my parents at some point sort of came to New York because they wanted to open a store there. And sort of like that's where I was exposed more. But very little. And what is interesting is that I didn't really realize it till much, much later. I will say that sort of that looking backwards, I can say that there were definitely a lot of elements of I felt different. Clearly something was different in me. I was very angry because I didn't understand why I didn't feel like everybody else. Why did everybody else seem to be happier than I am? So that came a little later. But it wasn't sort of clear to me from relatively on. It was about 16 or 15, 16 when I started sort of like thinking about it in such a way. But even the beginning, and this is funny because like, you know, I think Orthodox people who grew up in sort of like gender segregated communities would understand this better. At the beginning, I thought that that's why boys are with boys and girls are with girls.
Right. Because
I didn't think, like, it wasn't, I remember somebody asking in class, why are we praying separate than the girls? And the rabbi said, like, because we don't want to get distracted. And I remember actively, and I was pretty young, thinking, like, by what?
Yeah.
Like the perfume? Like I was like, what's the distraction? Like, I don't understand.
Didn't connect.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Later on, I was like, oh.
Yeah.
I guess I'm the
I was already distracted.
But I was like, that's why all the boys are with the boys.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I actually, worked with a person who also grew up in an Orthodox community and is also gay and had a very similar experience. Like they didn't really know because they were so insulated. So it was never really explained to them that this was even a thing that existed, right?
Exactly. And nobody, and this is one of the things, in general in recovery, and I think in general it's true for the general public as well. Your inner world is your inner world, right? And it's sort of like, it's interesting, right, how we don't always examine it when we're young in that sense, right? So like you just think that's how it is, right? Yeah. It's later on then you start to think about like, oh, something may be wrong with me. It's not that sort of older, but I do think the sort of that the sort of self-examination comes a little later. And when you're a child, which I think why there's so much magic in that children, you just think like everybody else is like you,
right? And I think that's some of the beauty of, I grew up in a small New England town, right?
Where?
Gardner, Massachusetts.
Okay, yeah.
Like Fitchburg, Worcester County area.
Yeah.
So I grew up in this really teeny town, pretty poor. It wasn't a wealthy, it was, lower and like middle class people. And there's people from my hometown that have never left New England, let alone Massachusetts. A lot of them have never even been to New York, right? Which is just it's a train wreck. You know what I mean? Going to Boston. Half of them have barely even been to Boston, right? It's like 45 minutes to an hour away.
Right.
And outside of just even leaving the East Coast, like traveling other parts of the United States or other parts of the world, it gives you an opportunity to have exposure to different cultures, foods, lifestyles. I remember I had a friend come out and visit and she said, "You guys eat the weirdest stuff out here." We were at an Italian restaurant, right? And I was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "I saw something on the menu that said there was bologna." And I'm like, "Bolognese?"
Bolognese, yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? That's how small town and insulated, like sushi, no sushi, just no access to different ways of living, different cultures, different religions. Everybody was Catholic.
Right,
everyone was Catholic. There was a couple other, Christian denominations in my hometown, but all in all, pretty much Catholic.
The freaks.
Yeah, exactly. The freaks, freaking Baptists. No, yeah. It's just very interesting.
But I will say, I do envy some of that. Right? I have many blessings in my life. And one of them is, of course, sort of a cosmopolitan sort of experience and life and all that. But there's a certain element when I look at people who grew up in the same house and sort of in the same town, in the same place, who live in the same town, in the same place, in the same house, the level of psychic and spiritual noise that's probably is at a minimum, right? So as opposed to sort of me, this sort of cosmopolitan sort of Jew, this sort of is constantly what am I going to have for dinner tonight? Blah blah blah. And should I go there? So I've been to London.
Cosmopolitan Jew. I like that.
And sort of how sort of I'm an immigrant, right? And there's an amazing, one of my favorite lines in all of sort of poetry is by this sort of poetess. Her name is Rachel, and she writes, perhaps only migrating birds when they are suspended between heaven and earth know the pain of having two homelands. And that's my existence. I always feel like that. Right. I'm always at home and always not at home. Even in this job, I'm always somewhere, and there's always somewhere else. And some of it is wonderful because I speak 9 languages. I know world food. I'm just as comfortable in Edinburgh as I am in in New York City, and yet what does it look like to speak one language, be in one place, having like, right, the sort of radio in the back of the room.
Well, I think you said it like even as a child, like you only know what you know.
You know, but exactly. So I have some envy for that, but I get it. Yeah.
I will say, I'm not going to say all of them, but very few of the people in my hometown seem to be happy. There's really some.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, there are some, but it's like I go on social media and it's like the same drama as when we were in high school, and it's all on Facebook. I'll see these Facebook wars. I'm like, oh my gosh. It was like nothing's changed. Exactly. It's been 20 years.
Exactly. And that's why nobody likes you, Karen.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's true. But I do think, right, so like we're talking about recovery, part of the spiritual work, part of the recovery work is how do we quiet down that sort of that noise in the head, right?
The worldly clamors, right?
Right. How do we go to a place where sort of like it feels like a hometown, it feels like home, the choices are not as much, right? How do we take actions and sort of choose ahead of time? What I talk a lot about sort of budgeting your spiritual life, but also your physical life, and how do you plan ahead your meal and what you're going to have and how you're going to go to the supermarket and all these things, sort of like, which is sort of a simplifying of life. Yeah, which is very much recovery. So absolutely.
I mean, structure. I am the most type A person these days that you can meet. That was not my life pre-sobriety. I'll tell you what. There's this picture that I have a good friend, a Jewish friend who's an attorney in Boston and has known me since I was 18, knew me in the height of my addiction. And when I first got out of prison this last time and I was newly sober, I reached out to him because we've always stayed in contact over the years, and he's a normie. And he always knew something was going on with me. He wasn't quite sure exactly what. He knew I was on something. And I was like, hey, I'm so sorry for, how I mistreated you and your home and all of this stuff. And he sent me this picture. He's like, what are you talking about? And it's a picture of me in his living room, and I'm just having a yard sale. I have like 4 suitcases. I dumped them, and he's very clean, okay? Very organized guy, yeah. And I'm just, the whole living room has stuff everywhere. He was like, and I was like, oh my God, I couldn't imagine living that way now. It's so interesting how much we shift.
But that's the thing, I think, right, for a lot of people in their addiction, the chaos inside is so unbearable that we have to create chaos outside.
Right.
We constantly have to find ways to make the inside feel like the outside and vice versa. And I think sort of like, that's, and sometimes it's outward in, and someone it's sort of inward out. Right. So when we start structuring our life, all of a sudden some of the things inside sort of gets organized as well. I mean, like I always feel better after I clean my room or clean my house, right? I don't know why, right? So like, but like I'll clean, I'll vacuum, and like, oh, and it wasn't dirty in the first place, but sort of like
you feel refreshed. Yeah, I tell my husband, I'm like, if I ever stop making our bed in the morning, because that's part of my cycle. I'm like, I'm not okay.
Housekeeping. That's sacred housekeeping.
I'm like, something is not okay. You better start looking for rehabs because I'm not doing well.
There's great research about people who make their beds in the 100%. Morning, right? So
when I go to hotels, I make the bed. It's part of my morning routine.
Yeah. We call it sacred housekeeping, which is really, really important.
I love that.
Yeah. And people who make their bed, by the way, the research shows that are more successful and more content in their lives.
Interesting.
It's because you do something that is for its own sake.
Right.
Because it makes no sense.
Right.
You're going to get into it, right?
Yeah.
But to do something because you said yourself you would, and organizing is enough of a start of a good day, enough of, sort of, again, I talk about spiritual bank accounts, about putting money, right? It's sort of like it's a deposit into your spiritual bank account.
Well, so I want to go back. So how old were you when you ended up coming out?
So I came out
to your family, at least.
Yeah. I inadvertently came out when I was 16.
How do you inadvertently come out?
So we're having a conversation. We were in New York with my family, again, which is very, 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 very conservative. And my father starts talking about sort of like marriage, right? Sort of we get married relatively young. And I said, I'm not getting married. And he said, what do you mean you're not getting married? I was like, I'm not getting married. He said, well, we're going to have to find you a girl and you're going to have to get married and all that. And I listened like, absolutely not. I'm not getting married. Like, why not? And I said, well, first of all, I don't want to. And two, like, I don't want to be with girls. I'd much rather be with boys. And he was like, what do you mean you want to be with boys? Like in yeshiva? And I'm like, no, I mean, yes, but also I don't like women. I like men. And I didn't, in that moment, I wasn't planning on coming out. It was just part of the conversation.
Did you know at that time that his reaction would...
No.
Yeah, so you didn't even know that it wasn't something that was appropriate as far as he was concerned, right?
I mean, I knew,
or acceptable, or whatever.
In me was in that space, but it wasn't. Again, because I
wasn't conscious.
I didn't say the word. I wasn't coming out. It wasn't. It was a conversation about my preferences,
right?
Rather than like
vanilla or chocolate. It was just who you are.
Taking on an identity, right? So like now with identity politics, right? It's sort of like, are you gay? Are you straight? Are you bisexual? Are you pansexual? Like, right? What's your pronoun? And all that. So fine, whatever. But but I do think that there is. Sort of like at least for me, there was a conversation that was way sort of deeper, sort of like it wasn't something that I was struggling with in a sense, because it wasn't an identity issue, rather than, again, a preference of how I thought my life is going to be. And I was just going to be with sort of boys. And it wasn't even in the sexual way. It was just a thing.
Right.
And my father freaked out, truly, and basically threw me out.
In that moment. That day you were out of the house.
I didn't know that day that I was going to be being thrown out, because I really thought it's going to be, and maybe I'll come back in a couple of days. But
right.
No.
Wow. Where did you go?
My first couple of days I went to some friends, and then I went to some other friends, and I called, and then my mother's like, no, I don't think he's coming, and you're coming. And then after I think a week or two into it, I was like, okay, I'm not going home. And I just, I couch surfed and with some friends, and
other Orthodox friends, or
some Orthodox and some not. Some people from around, people who knew me.
Yeah.
I went to a shelter for a couple of days. I was outside for a couple of days. It depends, sort of like it really.
Outside in New York.
Yeah. No. This was, it's sort of like, it's a really deep sort of rabbit hole of like that year of mine when I was younger and being in New York, and it's like the late 80s, and I didn't know much about myself or others, and sort of like or
the world even, because you had been in a very structured.
It was pretty traumatic.
Yeah, yeah.
But you make it work.
Right.
I learned very quickly that you have to take care of it.
How did this rejection from your faith community impact you emotionally and spiritually at that time?
So it's an interesting question, because it's hard to really look back and tell you it's one reaction.
Right.
There was definitely elements of like where, you know what, you don't want me, I don't want you. And I tried to reject a lot of it, and I did reject a lot of it. And but then there was a moment where it was like, this is what they believe in.
Yeah.
Like I it's hard for me to be angry when they have been taught in a way that sort of is generational.
Right.
Am I expecting them to be on my page immediately? That would not be fair. And I know, and people some say like, oh, you're making excuses, but I'm not, in the sense of like, I understand, and there's my anger around my own rejection.
Right.
But then there is like, this is the best they knew. They didn't know anymore. And I will say, but this is really important, that the reason I decided to become a rabbi, because that was not evident to me, because I was literally was like, you know what, like I'm going to do something completely
Screw the
different.
Jewish faith, right?
Literally.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
I can imagine.
Like, I don't know if I can swear here. But
well,
like,
you can swear.
Oh, then you know, fuck right off.
Right.
All of you. But at some point, there was a moment, I was in India at that moment, and I said to myself, you know, what would have it looked like if I had a rabbi like me back then that I could talk to?
Right.
And I said, well, then I need to become this rabbi.
You need to be what you needed as
That's
a child.
Right. So I chose to be a rabbi, and I still, on a daily basis, choose to be a rabbi that me, young Iggy, needed at that time.
Right.
I'm going to be the rabbi that I wish I had when I was a kid. And that's really the trajectory of almost entirely my rabbinate, and the way I see my life, the way I see my role, the way I see my spiritual role, the way I see myself as a father, as a friend, as a mentor. Yeah.
Wow. So you said something about your parents, and you said, oh, maybe some people say I'm making excuses, but I really connect with that because, you know, my parents loved me, and they were not perfect, and they made a lot of mistakes, and, you know, things happen, and, you know, childhood trauma, generational trauma, alcoholism, all the things, right? The old song and dance, right? And I really do today look at it from a perspective of genuinely, and it's so cliche, like they were actually doing the best they could with like what they knew, right? Yeah. And you mentioned your parents just they were doing what they thought was right.
Correct.
And when you bring in the word God, right?
That's
like
right.
They were doing what they thought their God needed and wanted them to do, right?
And still do.
Genuinely, exactly. And
my
so
family still does.
It wasn't, oh, I'm an evil person and I need to, you know, I don't love my child. If anything, if you put it, if I was in their perspective, it was probably, oh, I love my child dearly. But I have to do this because, you know, that's the belief.
I mean,
right?
I mean that, you know, look, and I think that's everybody's struggle, right? What happens when the values conflict?
Right.
What happens when, yes, you love your child, hopefully, or you want to, right? You really want what's best for them, and there's the right thing to do that you think either God or morality, whatever, right? Especially for a lot of parents in addiction, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Sort of like when you want to help them, but you know that if you let them back in, they will steal from you again or use at home, right? What happens when the two values conflict? And that's really difficult, right? And every parent, every person, every friend, right, sort of deals with it separately, right?
Oh my gosh.
We have our own thing, but those really where the life moments are, right? Those values. And as a person who's working in recovery in that sense, sort of like, right, what's the relapse that's too much? What's the next chance? What's the second chance or the third chance or the fourth chance, right? Where do we, and it's a ongoing case by case scenario of all times, but I do think that there's elements that you can only really judge when you are in it from that perspective. Yeah,
I mean, at the peak at our facility, we're constantly coaching parents, and sometimes we have people who have been to treatment 20, 30 times, and their parents are just paying and paying and paying, and then they'll leave.
Until they can't, and then they come to me.
Exactly. Well, that's the point. Yeah. I mean, we just recently had somebody who had done this song and dance quite a few times, you know, had a family, has financial resources, would end up-downtown for 24 to 48 hours before they'd inevitably call their parents and start the cycle all over again.
That's right.
And it got to a point like, okay, you know, rehabs all want the money. Yeah, we genuinely want to help people, right? That's right. And so we got to a point where we were like, okay, we need to coach Dad up and tell him, cut it off. We're not taking him back. And also, we are going to give you all the support in order for you to not do the same thing you've been doing for him 100 times over. Right. He can't just go out for a day or two and call you again. He needs to sit for a week or two or a month or two. And then you have to put some boundaries in place and some expectations, and you need to hold to them. And the first thing that, you know, a loved one says is well, what if he dies while he's out there? And the truth is that could happen.
That's 100%.
But also, how would you feel if you were the one who's contributing to that?
That's the thing, right? One of the most insidious things about addiction, you know, alcohol, drugs, whatever, is that in many ways they're dead already, and we have to revive them.
Yeah, brought back from the dead.
That is not a life, right? And if you continue to drink and continue to use drugs or whatever, you are committing the world's slowest suicide. Right. Sort of like, right? There's sort
death by 1,000 paper cuts, right?
That's right. Death by 1,000 drinks, right?
Right.
And I think that sort of that there is a tension there, as there always is, between, especially as a parent, right? I'm a parent, right? Of like, it's very not Al-Anon, I know, but you're only as happy as your least happy child. And on the other hand, do you really want to be able to sort of to put a boundary and help? And so, and it's hard. And again, it's a case by case scenario,
right?
But it's very difficult. But to come back to the original thing, like for me, in order for me to really live the best life that I can, not only do I need to sort of forgive, I need to find compassion in it.
Empathy.
In the sense of sort of like, if I continue to be angry and resentful, it's only going to poison me.
Right.
Right? As my grandfather used to say, getting angry is punishing yourself for the stupidity of others.
100%. It's true.
Right. So I don't want that.
Right.
And and again, so like, I wish I could say that 16 was the first big trauma of my life. It was other things when I was a child. Look, one of the most difficult things I asked for myself, and again, I don't subscribe it to anybody else, and some people, it might be too harsh for them. But if I think back of my life and I look at the worst things that's happened to me, if I ask myself truly, what if this is the best thing that's happened to me?
Right.
Not to excuse it, not to think, but what if this is the best thing that's ever happened to me, right? Those traumatic things. What did I learn from it? What am I taking from it?
What can I do with this experience?
That's right. And for me, the traumas of my childhood are the battery that keeps fueling my compassion.
Well, I mean,
my understanding.
Your experience and this religious trauma, this being shunned from your community, your faith, your family, right, is the thing that has led you.
Right. And also other traumas. I'm just saying, like, so like all of it, even like, some abuse as a child, right? I choose to learn from it, right? I choose to ask myself, what is the lesson in it for me?
Right.
How can I use this?
Yeah.
And transform it?
Yeah, my pain can be someone else's medicine.
That's right. Or somebody else's understanding.
Yeah.
My ability to sit in a room with these people around me and understand other people's pain that's not exactly my own fuels me every day.
Right. So do you think that religious trauma pushes a lot of people into addiction?
Some, yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure at Beit T'Shuvah. I mean, I know for a fact that you see a lot of Orthodox, Hasidic, people who have been...
Right. But not just the Orthodox, Catholics, extreme Muslims, right? So like we have all of them. It can because one of the things in recovery, right, is finding your own voice. And one of the things in religious sort of institutions is your voice doesn't matter as much, right? Comply, right? And that tension between them, right? The ability to find spaces between those two are the things that are important. So religious trauma is definitely, and also the repression, right? The repression of sexual desires, the repression of being noticed, the repression of being creative, the repression of doing things that are not of the norm. Those repressions definitely can sort of like fuel sort of like, I'm not being seen, I don't matter, something is wrong with me, right? Sort of so like,
self-medicate.
Right? When you look at a lot of addicts, right? A lot of them have learning differences. Right, a lot of them have, were brought up in families that were not original families, multi-generational families, foster adoptions, right? So if you take all these things, right, sort of like ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, right, auditory processing disorder. If you take sort of like people who are abused, right, people who are neglected, people who are abandoned. If you take people, right, who have all these characteristics that sort of like, right, they sort of grew up in different families. At the end, the mechanics comes back to this one thing, which says something's wrong with you. You don't learn like anybody else. What are you, stupid? Why can't you sit down? Why can't you comply? Why can't you do this? You're somebody else's rag. Somebody doesn't want you. Somebody abandoned you. Yeah. And it all boils down to these three words: you don't matter.
Right.
When God made you, He made junk.
Right.
And that's a lie.
Right.
It's false.
But that's this belief and this
that's
delusion.
The belief. And part of the work, both in recovery and definitely in spiritual work, is changing that.
Right.
You matter just by being born.
Right.
You have value just by being you, however you are, warts and all. Right? On Friday nights when I lead services, I almost always say the same thing, right? You come here. Why fit in when you can belong?
Right.
Right? I don't need you to be bigger, smaller, fit into this, fit into that, richer, whatever. Like, I want you to come and feel just as you are.
Well, isn't it one of the interesting things that happens when a person comes into recovery and gets sober? At least for me, I didn't even know who I was. Like, you could just be you. Right. I'm like, well, who is Glynis?
That's right.
I mean, when I first got sober, I was still going by my street name, Boston. Mind you, I mean,
Boston.
I'm not even from Boston. I told you where I'm from. I'm not even from Boston. That's how delusional I was, right? And this is what they called me in prison.
I love it. It's like people who don't live in LA, like, I'm from LA. Oh, where are you from? Yeah, Redondo Beach. Like, that's not LA.
Exactly. So that was me.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. If I ever would have called myself Boston to a Bostonian, I probably would have got a beat down. But like, that is how delusional. The first year of my sobriety, I was still going by that name, right?
Yeah.
Like my sober mentors didn't even know my real name. Okay. It's just so delusional. And I just thought I was like this like little hood rat from the streets. And like, my dad was a postman. We didn't grow up rich, but there's food on the table. I played soccer. Yeah. I'm not from the streets.
Right.
I had been living there by choice. Right. You know what I mean? But it's just so funny. So that first year of sobriety was really like, who am I?
Right.
What does Glynis like? I had never ran before until I got sober. And now, I'm running
Marathons.
marathons. I mean, I had no idea who I was, what my identity was, what kind of music I liked, what my passions were, what kind of comedy I liked. I didn't even know. I was so disconnected from self.
It's interesting you say that because we were just having this conversation this morning with we have every Friday sort of like the spiritual department meeting, and we talk about interventions and stuff. And I was saying to some of the interns that work for us, some of the intervention that I work with clients is, do you have a poem that is your favorite? And if so, did you memorize it? And if you don't, why not? Do you have a bucket list? Right? What do you like to do?
Right.
What are the things you want to do? Right? Because those are really, really important, fundamental, even the basic ones.
Right.
What's your favorite meal?
Right.
What's your favorite color?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that because again, we don't spend enough time feeding the question of, well, who are you?
Yeah, being curious about yourself.
And especially, in a small town where you're you go from this school to this school, from this high school to this thing, maybe to this other school, right? There's a feeder.
Everybody goes there, right?
There's a feeder. And when you're part of this sort of feeding machine, it's so easy to fall either between the cracks or get crushed by it. And part of recovery always is, what do I like? Yeah. Who do I want to be? Can I change? Can I continuously change? Right? So can I find all these elements and evolve and grow as a person? Mm-hmm. Right? Which is why, right? So you don't have to be an addict to be in recovery.
Absolutely not.
Right? Or as one of my old mentors used to say, you are either in recovery or you're in denial.
Right.
Right. Sort of which is a little harsher way
Grow
of saying
or die, right?
That's right.
That's really what it comes down to.
Life is like a motorcycle. If it doesn't move forward, it falls.
100%. And that's for addiction, mental health, but just human beings in general. For me, I'm always having to grow. And what worked yesterday or last year, it's an ever-changing landscape, right? Things have to shift. We have to be flexible, open.
Life changes all the time. And if you don't change with it, oops.
Yeah. It's going to be uncomfortable for you. It's really what it's going to be. Because the world is still going to be the world and things are going to be ever changing. And if you're the one trying to hold it all together and keep it stopped, you're going to fail.
And I'm move with it. Right. Yeah. And if you fall, right? Fall forward.
But
that's part of the beauty of it all.
Exactly. Getting to a place of realizing, and, I am very spiritual and I believe in an energy source. And I genuinely believe that God, which is just the word I use, is everything, right?
It can be, yeah.
And this idea of everything means it's the good, the unicorns, the butterflies, the happy moments, the marathon.
But also the bad, but also the pain.
The pain, the trials, the tribulations, and the adversity. Right. If I just have enough faith in a moment to recognize that even this is God too. Because if God is everything, God is everything.
That's right.
Then I have to be willing to believe that the universe is not doing this to me, but for me. And I didn't need to exactly know who, what, when, why, or what the message is, or what the light in the tunnel is. I just need to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And if I could have a really painful, hard, challenging, scary moment, week, month, year experience, and know that whatever it is, there is a light at the end of the tunnel and there's some kind of purpose behind it, then I could be in peace and feel closest to this energy source in that moment.
Yeah, not just so first of all, it could be a long tunnel, but two things I would say. One, I truly believe that the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, has only three answers for you. Mm-hmm. Only three. yes, not yet, wait, I've got something better coming for you.
Yeah.
Only these three.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really important, because a spirituality that doesn't contend with the evil, the bad, the ugly, all that is not spirituality.
Right.
Right? Good vibes only, no thanks.
Yeah, there's the duality of it all.
Toxic positivity. We call it spiritual bypassing.
Right.
Absolutely not, right? Spirituality, like I said, even for me, like, what did I learn from it, right? From my trauma, right? What do I do with all these elements? And that, I think, is really one of the most beautiful things for a lot of people in recovery, right? The ability to say, like, okay, how do I take my rock bottom and change it into something else, right? I think that's the beauty of spiritual living, which is to be aware of everything around you. Right. Many times when people come in and they come and their heads are down, and I say to them, right, take your eyes off your goddamn feet and look up. Right? The choices we're going to make, the paths you're going to take require you to look up and look at the world.
Right.
And we are so used to sort of, right, being closed off and bowing down and not looking and not breathing and not having our shoulders up, because we somehow have sort of, right, drank the shame and the guilt that something is wrong with us, that this is failure of
that
moral
I'm irrevocably
character,
broken,
right? Sort of, right? So there's some kind of like a character that's not good, and right, and I reject it and be like, absolutely not. Right? Let's take our liabilities, make it into our assets, right? Let's create something that is really amazing out of whatever it is that was paining you. Can we change it and morph it into something that you can take forward? And that's the kind of the work that we do, right? How do I learn about you, take those liabilities, and make them into your assets, right? Sort of like, I'm sure for you, there were moments where, like, right, there's a little baggie at the end of the city. You're somewhere else. You need to find a way from that baggie to
I'll figure it out.
Right, with no money, no friends, you'll figure it out.
In a blizzard.
That's right, right? You'll figure it out. So what if we took that creativity and put it somewhere else? Imagine what you can do.
Right. Who knows? Maybe I'd be hosting a podcast or something.
What? No.
So, how do you explain the difference between religion and spirituality?
Oh, great question. Religion is a set of norms, ideas, regulations, rules, accepted truths, right, that we belong to, that we choose to be part of as a group, and all these things. Spirituality is the language we use for making meaning of the experiences that we have. Religion is a way to spirituality, but it's not the only way to spirituality, right?
There's no monopoly on God.
There's no monopoly on God, right? One of my favorite things and I wish it was me who said it, but it's not. It's God has no grandchildren.
You should have just said it was you. I would have believed you.
No, I wish. But living in authenticity. Right? In that sense, we all have a path to God directly. Every single person in this world.
It's inside us.
That's
We're
right.
born with this inherent belief of spirit, of energy.
And you may not call it God. Or
Right.
And again, even if you're an atheist, there's still some kind of universe or something larger that you can connect to. It could be hope, it could be love, it could be art, it could be a lot of different things.
So, the solar system, science, math.
Right, exactly. Some kind of organizing principles that allow you to make judgments of values, actions of values on a day-to-day basis, right? So spirituality for me is really about how do we make meaning of the experiences that we have, right? And the essence of who we are interpreting, right? The spirit and spirituality of who we are. And religion, right, is the groups that we belong to, the taxes that we pay to, right? The spaces we build around it when we have a shared ideas of norms and rules and regulations.
Belief systems, right?
And it can be very freeing because I don't eat this and I do eat this, or I believe in this, or I cross my chest like this, or so like it can be very easy because it allows us to be like, okay, I believe I'm doing the right thing. Right? So it's a way, right?
It could be, it can be someone's path, absolutely.
And it can be absolutely beautiful.
Right.
But they're separate. There's a Venn diagram, right? So they have a sort of Venn diagram, but they are separate in that sense. And I think true people who are truly spiritual, allow themselves to again, find magic in the world, whatever that magic is, right? It requires a certain amount of curiosity.
You just took the words out of my mouth. Yeah,
like,
curiosity.
And it's kind of amazing, right? Because it really is all about us and our perspective. So...
And also seeing it from a different, willing to change it, right? Being willing to change that perspective.
Serenity prayer, right? My favorite element of all times, right? To accept the things I cannot change and to change the things I cannot accept, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? Those elements are really sort of like words to live by on a sort of a real deep basis, no matter where you are in your life, no matter when you're recovery or not, right? Can you look at the world? Can you bring awareness? And can you choose to grow when you can and accept the things that you can't?
Yeah. Okay, I have a couple questions for you before we wrap up.
Sure.
What is one of the biggest misconceptions about rabbis?
Ooh.
You have to think about this one, huh?
Well, I think a lot of people forget that we're human. I think a lot of people forget that because of that, we also have our own sort of dark sides and light sides, that we also have some struggles, that we don't always have all the answers.
You're fallible.
Right? I think, yes, we're fallible. I think for a lot of people, they see me with the tattoos. I'm like, that's impossible. Or rabbis can't be gay or can't have tattoos. Or
but yet here you are.
Right. Can't be cool. I think sort of the infallibility of sort of like, right, we often want our spiritual leaders to be the best version of the things that we don't want to be ourselves.
Or this like godlike figure almost.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest misconceptions in that sense.
One simple spiritual practice that anyone can start today.
Journaling. Right? What values are you choosing today? Benjamin Franklin and his, we have I've compiled a journal, a way to journal for recovery and in general. And one of the questions that's borrowed from Benjamin Franklin from his diary is waking up in the morning and be like, what good shall I do today?
Wow.
The other one that I like is to remind yourself of the world is every day to find a bloom, something in bloom. Right? I don't go to bed until I've found a bloom in the day. Not in your vase, not in a pot, but go outside and find something in bloom. It's much easier in the summer and much easier in LA.
Right.
But in the winter or somewhere else, like what is in bloom? It could be a tiny little flower. It could be a blossom of a tree. Find something to remind you that the world still moves around and blossoms and blooms in spite of you.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. There's you're not the only thing happening.
There's one of my favorite things in my tradition is that a person should carry 2 notes in his pocket. One note in your pocket should say, the world was created for me. It's all about me. I am the center of creation.
Right.
And the other note should say, I'm nothing but dust and ashes. I too shall die. I'm too like everybody else. And you have to always find the balance. Me, not me, me. And when you're too lowly, right, to take the note says, the world was created for you. And when you're too haughty, to remind yourself, right, so like, I'm nothing but dust and ashes. And sort of to find that balance.
There 100% needs to be a balance.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for coming onto the show, Rabbi Iggy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Honor to have you on. I really enjoyed the conversation. I absolutely love Beit T'Shuvah. A huge proponent. I think I'm going to be there tonight for the marathon Shabbat.
Then I will see you on the bima.
I will bring my medal.
I will see you on the bima then.
Amazing. Well, I'll have to have you back on sometime soon. And thank you for the interesting combo.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for joining us today on another episode of The Peak of Possibility. This show has been hosted by Peak Path Health. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, mental health, and you need support, please send us a DM, give us a call, go to our website, or shoot us a comment. We want to hear from you.